It's one of the most recognizable vehicles in the world. It fought in wars. It crossed continents. And today, it sits quietly in everyday driveways. The Jeep. But here's the strange part. Everyone knows what it is. Almost no one knows why it's called that. Was it a military code, a technical abbreviation, or just a random name that stuck? Because the truth isn't simple. It's a mix of wartime urgency, corporate competition, and something no one expects, a cartoon character. And once you hear the real story, you'll realize the name Jeep was never supposed to happen. The story of the Jeep doesn't start with a name, it starts with a problem. The year is 1940. War is spreading across Europe, and the United States knows it's only a matter of time before it gets pulled in. The military needs a new kind of vehicle, something fast, lightweight, and capable of going anywhere. Something to replace horses and outdated motorcycles, so they issue a request to over 100 car manufacturers. The requirements? Almost impossible. It had to be light. It had to have four-wheel drive. It had to be rugged enough for war, and most importantly, they needed a working prototype in just 49 days. For most companies, it was unrealistic. Too fast, too risky. So, they ignored it. Except one, a small struggling company called Bantam. They had nothing to lose, so they took the risk. Working day and night, pushing engineers to the limit, they managed to deliver a functioning prototype just in time. And what they built would change automotive history forever. But there was a problem. They were too small to mass produce it. Bantam had done the impossible. They built the vehicle. They proved it could work. But success created a new problem. The U.S. Army looked at Bantam and realized something critical. This company was too small, even if the design was perfect. They didn't have the capacity to produce thousands of vehicles at the scale war demanded. So the Army made a controversial decision. They took Bantam's blueprints and handed them to two much larger companies, Ford and Willys Overland. Overnight, what started as one company's breakthrough became a three-way competition. Each company began building its own version of the same idea, testing, modifying, improving. By 1941, 3 different models were being pushed to their limits by soldiers in the field, and the response? Immediate. They loved them. These vehicles were small, tough, unpredictable, able to drive over terrain that would stop almost anything else. Mud, sand, rocks. It didn't matter. They just kept going. But here's the important part. At this stage, they still weren't called Jeeps. They had names like Bantam Reconnaissance Car, Willys, B Blitz, Buggy Functional, Technical, Forgettable. So where did the name Jeep come from? Because it definitely didn't start in a factory. Ask almost anyone where the name Jeep comes from, and you'll hear the same answer. GP, short for General Purpose. The story goes like this. The military labeled the vehicle GP. Soldiers started saying the letters out loud. GP, GP, which eventually turned into Jeep. It sounds perfect, simple, logical. But there's one problem. It's almost certainly wrong. Here's why. The GP label wasn't even universal. It was only used by Ford. And even then, it didn't mean general purpose. In Ford's internal coding system, G stood for Government Contract P, referred to a specific wheelbase. 80 inches, nothing to do with purpose, nothing to do with naming, and it gets even worse for the theory. The most widely used version of the vehicle, the Willys model, wasn't called GP at all. It was officially named the Willys MB BA. So if soldiers were already calling these vehicles Jeeps, and the main version didn't even use the GP label, then the name couldn't have come from that abbreviation, which means the most popular explanation is just a myth. So if it didn't come from military code, where did the name actually come from? Because the real answer is much stranger. If the name didn't come from GP, then where did Jeep actually come from? To find the answer, you have to go somewhere completely unexpected. Not a factory, not a battlefield, but a comic strip. Back in the late 1930s, one of the most popular comics in America was Popeye the Sailor Man, and in 1936, a new character was introduced, a strange little creature named Eugene the Jeep. Eugene wasn't like anything else. He was small, fast, almost impossible to control, and he had one unique ability. He could go anywhere, through walls, across dimensions, into places no one else could reach. And whenever he appeared, he made a simple sound. Jeep, Jeep. The character became incredibly popular. So popular that the word Jeep entered everyday slang. People started using it to describe anything that was new, unusual, capable of doing the impossible. So when soldiers first encountered this strange little military vehicle, it made perfect sense. It was small, it was unpredictable, and it could go places no normal vehicle could. So they gave it a nickname. Jeep, not from engineering, not from code, but from culture. For a while, Jeep was just a nickname, something soldiers said, informal, unofficial, but that changed in one moment. February 1941, Washington, D.C. A test driver named Irving Hausman was asked to demonstrate the vehicle's capabilities to politicians and the press. Instead of a simple drive, he did something unexpected. He drove the vehicle straight up the steps of the U.S. Capitol, not around them, not beside them, up the stairs. It was a bold move, and it worked. The reporters were stunned. Among them was a journalist named Catherine Hillier. She approached Hausman and asked the obvious question, "What is this thing?" He didn't say Willie's MB. He didn't mention specifications. He didn't explain the engineering. He just gave one answer. It's a Jeep. The next day, the photo appeared in the newspaper, and under it, the name, printed, clear, permanent. From that moment on, the nickname became reality. It wasn't just what soldiers called it anymore. It was what the world called it. So the next time you see a Jeep parked on the street, climbing a trail, or just passing by, remember this. That name wasn't engineered, it wasn't planned, and it definitely wasn't official. It was a nickname, born from soldiers trying to describe something they had never seen before. A machine that could go anywhere, do anything, and solve problems no other vehicle could. A machine that reminded them of something impossible. And somehow, that name stuck. From a comic strip, to a battlefield, to a global icon. Because sometimes, the most powerful names aren't created in boardrooms. They're created in moments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share it with someone who loves Jeeps, and subscribe for more hidden histories behind everyday things.